Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. This is episode number 169, Instrument Repair for Band Directors with Andre Yanniello from currently living in Texas. Andre, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Kyle?
Fantastic. I think this is a great topic for all of us band directors because all of us, if you work with instruments, should be better at repairing. And I think we're all at different levels. And what I love about your story is you've taken your passion and your history in band, but also turned that into now helping other people get better. So if everybody who's listening gets one thing out of this, I think it's an enormous win. First, Andre, let's just hear a brief background about you and your band history and how you got into the repair business.
Yeah, absolutely. So my band career began professionally. I was a euphonium player in the Army's 82nd Airborne Division Band. So I did that for about 10 years. And while I was involved in the military bands, I got into repair because, like saxophone and trumpet and trombone, I didn't have a lot of late night gigs to go to. So I spent my time in the repair shop there in North Carolina, and I studied under Dr. Daniel Parker. Um, so shortly after that, the military found out that I was learning how to do repair, and they agreed to send me to the Renton Technical College up near Seattle, Washington, to get my degree in instrument repair. And in exchange for that, I agreed to go back and service the instruments for the military bands. So I did that. So that was the whole 10-year span of my military career with that, working with all of the professional instruments. And so I decided to move to Texas and open up my own repair shop and service personally owned instruments and school instruments. And so I am in the North Texas area, and I have been happily servicing many of the programs from the local area for over 15 years now.
I love that. That's a great story, and maybe I've been living under a rock, but I guess I wasn't aware you could go to school and actually get a degree. What's the name of the institution again?
So the school that I went to is the Renton Technical College.
Great.
There are three really well-known big programs that are at community colleges. The
Okay.
most widely known is Red Wing, and that's in Minnesota.
Is that
And
the
then
same as
there's
the shoe place or different?
I'm not sure if the shoe place is the same, but it
Okay.
bears the same name. And then there's one in Iowa, and then of course Renton. And then there is also one of the ones that my mentor, Dan Parker, started, which is called the Colorado Institute of Musical Instrument Technology. Everyone calls it COMIT for short.
Hmm.
So that is a great place to go to. And under the encouragement of my mentor, I have decided to start teaching repair courses online and in person out of my shop here in Texas as well. And that's under the moniker Instrument Repair School.
Great. So people can reach out to you to get directly involved with that if they'd
Yeah,
like.
absolutely.
That's awesome. As a past episodes of interest, I was thinking because I want to learn so much about repair. I know we're going to dive into it. We do have had two other episodes that are not the same, but in the same realm. Jackson Smith, shout out to Jackson, who's a band director. Episode 118, when it was basically about percussion for the non-percussionists, a lot of repair stuff in that. And then one of our earliest episodes with Joe Betancourt, master repair technician, episode number 3, emergency instrument repair. So people are digging this,
Yeah.
and afterwards want to check out those. Those are great. Okay, so let's dig into this. Reasons why band directors shy away from doing their own repairs.
Yeah. So do you do a lot of instrument repairs for your students right now?
I do some. I'm lucky to half the day have a co-teacher with me. I'm a brass player, he's a woodwind player. And I've learned to do some things, but it's so easy if there's something woodwind and he's right there for him to just do it. So sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Yeah. So where did you learn to do a lot of this quick fix repairs? Did you just kind of tinker with it and figure it out, or did you have someone coaching you along?
It kind of depends. It depends on what it is. When you do something for 20 something years, you pick up some things. There are some clinics that I've been to and some things that I've watched. In fact, a great idea I saw when I was student teaching at that school, it was in just west of Honolulu in Hawaii. They actually had an instrument repair class where this teacher was a certified repair technician, and the kids could take a repair class. So they fixed all their friends' instruments as part of the class. But beyond the stuff I've picked up, I haven't done anything formally.
That's fantastic. So a lot of what I hear from other repair techs, and I know some of them have very different feelings about this, but a lot of repair techs will encourage directors not to touch the instruments because they're afraid they're going to cause more damage and create a more expensive repair. I happen to think very differently about that. And I encourage directors to get involved and learn everything about the instrument that they're teaching to the students so they can really go more in depth. If they understand all the pieces and parts of the instrument, then they can teach the kids when it's not just the student that's having an issue. It might be the instrument that's holding them back. And so that's why I think it's real important for directors to have really great knowledge of all of the pieces and parts and what they're supposed to do and what is right and know when it is wrong.
For me, some of the things that jump out. First of all, we all talk about it time, right? Like especially like
Yeah.
sometimes we have the amount of time to do it, but then for me as well, space. Like I don't really have a place to do it besides on my desk. And a
Yeah.
lot of that time thing too is like I know when I get into something, if I'm not totally sure how long it's going to take me, like I might not finish it in that area. You know, it might take longer than I have, and so those are things
Yeah.
that would stop me.
Yeah. So even here in my shop, so I've got a big old shop and I've got a bunch of different benches, but my main workspace is this one right here. And I've got about 3 foot by 2 foot worth of space where I fix the overwhelming majority of my instruments. I even put 3/4 tubas right here, and I
Hmm.
can do everything except for the large dent work. So it really doesn't take a lot of space. And the things that I'm talking about, that 80% of repairs that really never need to go into the shop, are things that I believe you can take care of in 2 to 5 minutes. If it's going to take longer than that, then maybe that is a side project. And I understand band directors are super, super busy, but how much class time are you losing with a student because we sent something out and it might have taken a technician, 2 minutes to fix? And if we could have carved out an extra 5 minutes after class or something to that effect, then maybe we could have had more time in the classroom. I hate to see when I'm visiting programs and they're having to stop constantly because they're trying to figure out, is it the kid or is it the instrument? Here, give me your instrument. Let me play it real quick.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, that is broken. Okay, it's in my hands and I just figured out what's broken. Uh, can I fix this real quick? And that's the spot that I really like to help with because I have directors text me all day, shoot me videos of like, hey, what's wrong with this? Can I fix this? And I've gotten to the point now where I've gotten really good at making the videos. And so if I have an instrument in front of me, then I'll set up the issue real quick and I'll film it and then I'll put it up on my YouTube and I'll just text them the link. So I've been able to effectively teach a lot of directors a lot of really quick things so that they can continue on with the rehearsal. So I don't think it really takes too much time. So as long as you're not scared to jump in.
So you mentioned YouTube. What's the name of your YouTube channel again?
The YouTube channel is Instrument Repair School.
Great, easy to remember. So why don't we jump into woodwinds first? We good
Yeah,
for that?
yeah, absolutely. So I was watching the episode with Joe Betancourt,
Yep.
and one of the things in there, it kind of made me laugh a little bit because I think a lot of the newer directors, especially the growing directors, they don't know what a cassette tape is, right? Or where are you going to go find cassette tape
Yep.
to make a feeler cage? So I love the tip. I just want to make an update on it because I like to teach directors how to use things that are just laying around in the band hall because
Sure.
cassette tapes aren't there anymore.
That's right.
So my favorite is a Pop Tart wrapper. So a Pop Tart wrapper is actually made out of Mylar. And that is one of the best materials to make a feeler gauge. So for those of you asking, what is a feeler gauge is what we use to determine where there is a leak under a woodwind pad. So if we're able to locate the leak, we can then decide whether the pad is bad a visual inspection to see if a pad is damaged or torn. So if we see things fraying out like this, let me make that adjust just a little bit there. So if we see a pad that's a little bit torn or really torn, I think I've got one more here. So if we see stuff like a flute pad that often gets little frayed edges from us polishing too much or too vigorously and rubbing the skin off the pad, we use a feeler gauge to find where those little leaks are. And once we decide if it's just a leak from a bent key, or maybe the pad cup got too hot from laying on the asphalt during marching band rehearsal and the pad moved, right? It
Yep.
happens on saxophones all the time. So if the pad just moved and it's not damaged, and we find the leak with our feeler gauge, well, now we may be able to reseat that pad by
just to
simply
be just
yeah.
to jump in really quick, I mean, some people don't even understand that. Like so you put it underneath the pad, you close the key, and you shouldn't be able to pull out the Pop Tart, the feeler gauge. If you can pull it out, then there's a leak in that area.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
show this on this one. So this is my feeler gauge.
yeah.
Now I've got the fancy holder because this is what I do all day, but I'll describe and show you how to make your own here in just a second. So if you think of the pad like a clock, you have 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way around. And you want to check first what we say the sides, or north, east, southwest, 12, 6, 9, 3. So we're going to simply place the feeler gauge, the Pop-Tart material, on top of the tone hole under the pad. And with the same pressure that you would close the key while playing, you're going to close the key. And then you will lightly pull on that feeler gauge. And if it doesn't easily come out, you have a good seal. And so then you'd move on and you'd check around to the next side. And with that normal playing pressure on the key touch piece, if the feeler gauge just easily falls out, then that is the spot with your leak. Does that make sense?
100% sense. And if people are listening, they can come back and watch the YouTube video if they want to see the visual. But I think you described that very well.
Yeah. So to make your feeler gauge in your band hall, you'll need 4 things. First of all, you're just going to find a Pop-Tart wrapper that's laying around somewhere,
Easy.
usually on the side of the trash can, right?
Or anywhere between you and the cafeteria.
Yeah. And then just grab any pencil. You're going to grab some Scotch tape, and you need a pair of scissors. And so what you want to do is you want to cut off a piece of that Mylar in let's call it a long triangle shape. It's been too long since I've been in school to remember the name of this triangle.
A pointy triangle.
A pointy triangle. Yeah, you want to have a small pointy tip at the end, because the smaller the point is on your feeler gauge, the better you're going to find little leaks. So if you can see kind of how this one looks on here, but I like to make the piece about 1 inch long. And then you're just going to take a piece of Scotch tape. You're going to lay it down on the table, take your Mylar and attach it to it real quick, just in the center of your tape. And I've got a fan going in here, so of course this is blowing around on me. But you just want to put that Mylar right on the tape, lay your pencil right over the top, and wrap it around the tape around to the pencil, so that way your Mylar, about 1 inch long, hangs off of the tip. And now you have your own little feeler gauge. Throw it in your toolbox that you're building, so that way you can find leaks.
That's
And this
brilliant.
will work for all woodwind instruments. So clarinet, flute, saxophone, oboes, bass clarinets, bassoons. This feeler gauge is what you're going to use to find all of those leaks.
Okay, so besides leaks, what are some other common woodwind issues that we find?
So other than the leaks on the pads, the most common things are what I call assembly and disassembly injuries. So on our clarinet, there are 2 major injuries that the students cause. And I think a lot of these can be prevented if the directors, when we're teaching students, or if we notice it, where the kids are holding the instruments. For some reason, anywhere where there's keys, like our bottom right hand four pinky keys that stick away off the body, or same with the left hand pinky keys, wherever these keys are, seems to fit in our hand really well, like a leverage handle. And the students cause damage with those. So we have two things that happen here. We call this little key on the bottom of the FC lever the crow's foot, because it kind of looks like a crow's foot. It's got the two pointed toes.
Sure.
And the students will grab this and they'll get right on top of it and they'll squeeze to twist these joints together. And when they do that, that bends this little crow's foot downward. What that causes to happen is the relationship between the EB and the FC will no longer work properly. So one key will still be slightly open when the other is fully depressed. And so you can easily see that if you follow the keys. So one of the things I was talking about in the notes was the understanding the engineering of the instruments. And I think a lot of this is easy to pick up and learn if we look at where the rods go and where they connect. So if I know I have a problem here and I follow the rod up to see where it connects, then I know the point that I need to adjust to fix the relationship between the two. So if I'm closing all the way here and I'm still open here, then I can see, let me get that shot in there. I can see that crow's foot is not touching the key. And as I described before, it's because the right hand went over those right hand pinky keys and squeezed very tightly, causing that to come down. Now, I have never seen anybody rip one of these crow's feet off. You can bend these things. You can get after them with a pair of pliers far more than you think you can. One caveat on a major name brand instrument. I
Correct.
would use some caution if it's not one of the very well-known manufacturers. There are some other brands that can also stand up to a little bit of experimenting, but there also are some that will break. So on the major name brands, you can torque on these things to your heart's content until you figure out where it goes. So think of it like a teeter-totter. You may move it too far one way, and that's okay. Now you know that that is wrong. So just go back the other way a little bit, and eventually you'll find that balance between these two keys to make both of the FC and the EB close perfectly.
Great. What's
Um,
another common?
the next common one on our clarinet is our bridge key.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, an assembly injury. And the best way to teach students to not do that is on their left hand. They want to make sure that they have their finger depressed on the A key or over the A, B flat. So that way they lift our bridge. Can I give you a shot? There we go.
Oh yeah, I can see it.
So we want to lift our bridge. Uh, so that way it will rest on top of the lower portion of our bridge key. The cork gets ripped off from here. And when that happens, now our B flat 1-to-1 key no longer seats all the way when we depress our right hand ring keys. So that's probably the number 2 most common thing to ever happen to the clarinet. If you can spot those things with your clarinet section, I recommend just going through your clarinets and taking a look at the crow's foot and take a look at the bridge key. I bet you'll find at least one of those issues in your clarinet sectionals. So if your clarinetists are having trouble in the upper register particularly, one of those is probably the culprit if it's not the G sharp and A adjustment screw.
Thinking of it from an engineering side of things is so different because as a trumpet player, like I'm so into all the brass things, and it's probably vice versa. But just you're right, those really help, and just following the rod. And I've also learned that the longer the rod, the easier it is to bend said rod. So
Mhm.
that's why the bigger instruments tend to have some of those more out of whack things more often.
Yeah, and again, those are mostly caused just by holding the instrument incorrectly while assembling it. And so, if we spend more time talking to the students about, hey, if you grab it here, this will break, and more time with, hey, it's okay to put your hand anywhere on a key cup that closes. So I teach students it's okay to go over the lower joint keys. All four of those lower joint keys, you can squeeze on those as much as you want, and you're not going to hurt anything on the clarinet. And same thing on the top. I can squeeze anywhere here where I'm actually touching a key cup and closing. I can be on the top by where the barrel is, or I can be over the center of it. So as long as I'm not squeezing on the trill keys or on the A and G sharp, as long as I'm not squeezing on those, I'm not going to mess anything up. And for the students that are squeezing really hard, then the next thing we're probably looking at is we probably have a cork that is too big or swollen, or alternatively, if you're in an area with high humidity, our joint, our inner clarinet tenon socket, and this goes for oboes and bass clarinets as well, and bassoons. It may be swollen because it's too humid. So if you get to that point, um, then it won't go in, and then they squeeze and they push all the way in. Well, now we may have messed up keys. We may have caused a crack by forcing those two pieces together, and um, we we have a whole bunch of other things that we may need to adjust there. So by noticing if the kids are squeezing, like investigating why are we squeezing, I think is important because that's going to tell us if there may be another issue.
Sure. One of the tricks that I learned a long time ago too is just taking each section of the clarinet, like the top joint and the bottom joint, and then plugging the end, covering the keys, and blowing through it, and
Yeah.
seeing if there's any leaks that way.
Yeah, and that's a great way to know if there is a leak really quickly.
Right.
And then you use that feeler gauge to then go check each key individually until you find the key that is causing you your problem.
Can we talk, but while we're on woodwinds, can we talk about the cork in the head joint of the flutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's a thing that as a trumpet player I always forget that if that's in the wrong spot, then forget about it, right? So I think we all know that we have those the flute cleaning rods, right, with a line on it,
Yep.
and if you put it
Uh-huh.
in, that line should be directly in the middle of the tone hole.
Yeah.
So what happens if it's not?
So if that is if the line on your tuning rod is not exactly in the center of the embouchure hole, then your flute is either going to be flat or sharp, depending on which way the cork plate is. I think I've got a flute here. Give me 1 second and let me grab a flute so I can
Sure.
demonstrate this.
There you go.
All right. So if we look at our flute cleaning rod, it's got a little line at the opposite end from where the silk cloth would go. That line is precisely 13 millimeters from the end of the rod. And 13 millimeters is the measurement that our cork plate should be from the center of the embouchure hole to make the tube the correct length, right? All instruments are just tubes of some sort, and they have to be a certain length to create a certain pitch. And so our head cork sets the length of this. Now, its purpose is, let's say, we're playing somewhere where it's really, really, really hot, and we just can't pull out anymore without the head joint becoming loose in the flute. We can actually lengthen the flute a little bit by turning the screw in, right? Turning it clockwise to pull that cork back a little bit to adjust our pitch. Now, having a good head cork is also important because if our cork is bad, then our flute will have so much trouble playing in the low register. All the foot joint keys will just be unresponsive. They won't speak very well. They'll be very fuzzy. And so you may think a student is having a difficult time playing down in the low register, but it might be actually it's their head joint. And so if you don't want kids to get discouraged and go, oh man, I'm a terrible player, I quit. When all it really was a bad head cork. Like that would be a terrible loss of a student. So one of the easiest ways to check.
I want before you check and show us. How do you know when it's a leak on the instrument? Like say they're going to play low D and they just really struggle. How do you know when it's a leak on the instrument versus the cork?
Feeler gauge. You
Okay.
use that feeler gauge. Yeah, you can use either a leak light. Leak lights, technicians, we say leak lights lie because of the pads being yellow and white. That light is sometimes deceptive and it may look like a pad is seating, but the feeler gauge will never lie to you. It either works or it doesn't. So you can use that to check all 3 pads or 4 pads on your foot joint quickly to see if everything is functioning properly. So the best thing you can do with your head joint to look for that leak is on the crown, the piece at the end that you can turn. If you gently pull on it and it wants to move, like you can actually pull it, right there, your cork is bad. It's dry. It's letting air up past the cork plate. So that's the end that blocks the end of the tube in your flute. So if the air comes up past this, and you can tell by discoloration on your cork, if your cork is in a nice, beautiful brown wood grainy finish, if it has greens and blacks on it, then all of that spit and moisture is leaking up the head cork. And that's causing very turbulent air. And it's messing with our pitch and our response. So you can replace these yourself, but there is a learning curve because it is a tapered cork. And so you have to be able to taper this and get it to fit back into the head joint. But you should never be able to just rip it right out.
So if you get to a point where you think it has to be replaced, is that something you suggest band directors try to do or send it to the shop?
I encourage the band directors who have a few simple tools and like to tinker to learn how to do it because there's nothing difficult about it if you have a couple of items. So obviously you need to order some cork, you need sandpaper, and you need a drill.
And you have a video of that on your YouTube page, right, for people to check
I
out?
do have a video of that on the YouTube page.
Great. So people should check out that if they want to do it. Let's get into brass land. My thing, when I learned about valve guides, it
Yeah,
changed my life because as a trumpet player, like, I haven't really had to deal with that in the models that I had. And then those low brass valve guides are just the death of me. But then when I figured out how they work, it fixed so many issues. So let's help some people out.
yeah. So you want to talk about the low brass or the
Yeah.
trumpet, both?
Let's do low
Okay.
brass first.
Okay, low brass, the number one problem that I see. Let's talk about euphoniums and tubas. Low brass kids like to spin things. And so they'll sit here and they'll twist their caps while they're not playing. And sometimes when they do that, our valve guide will move slightly and then they'll tighten it back up. And our valve may be back in the right position because it still has that tension on it. But the problem is the valve guide has now, let's say, pulled up the tip at an angle, and that creates a binding force in the what's called the keyway inside of the valve casing. So if you want to picture a circle and it has a little notch cut straight down the circle, and that's where our valve guide is going to go. So our valve guide is simply a piece of plastic or metal, and it has a notch on one portion of it that will fit in the keyway, and this prevents our valve from spinning around in the casing. And why that's important is because our valves have ports on them that line up with the tubing inside of our instrument. And so, again, talking about the engineering of the instrument, the air always flows in one direction. And so when a valve is in the up position, it might go through one hole, through a tube, and pass back through another hole to continue out the bell. When we depress the valve, it moves the air from going in first to, let's say, the top port, to the air going now in first to the second port and exiting out a different direction to go out through a different series of slides to make the pitch go up or down. So that's why it's important to make sure we know where the valve guide goes. Almost all of the low brass valves, I don't know why they do. Well, I kind of do, but I think it's real confusing to a lot of people. They'll have two holes on the top of them. I'm not counting this one where the threaded stem goes in. They'll have a big hole and they'll have a little hole towards the outer edge of the piston. One of the holes holds the valve guide into the correct orientation. So you can see this little nub of plastic right there. Maybe that's a decent shot. There's this
Yeah,
little
we can see
nub
it.
of plastic.
Yep.
That little nub of plastic, and you can tell by the size of it which hole it should go in because it lines up perfectly. So this top hole, the other big hole that's there, is a vent. So that way when we depress the valve, the air passes through the bottom hole and comes somewhere out the top. Otherwise, if they weren't there, the valves wouldn't go down. Or you know how sometimes you pull a slide out and it goes and it makes that pop noise?
Yeah.
It's because there's no venting on the valve. So that's a vent. Um, a lot of times when the students are playing with them, or I'll see directors trying to put together our low brass valves back together, we will put that little nub of plastic from the valve guide back in the wrong hole. And the valve will still function absolutely perfectly. But all of a sudden now, no air will go in because we've taken the ports from, let's say, being in this position. So let's say, 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and our valves have rotated 90 degrees. And so now our ports are not in front of a slide tube inside of the valve casing. So no air will go through. The best trick to figure out and quickly look, is my valve guide in the wrong spot? You should always be able to see the number on the top of the valve when the valve guide is in the correct position.
That's
If
cool.
you cannot see the number, it's either because the valve guide is in the wrong position or your valves need to be cleaned and there's so much stuff on top of them.
Great. That's awesome. You have a video where you teach us how to unstick them, how to repair the end of a mouthpiece that gets dented, like a low brass
Yeah,
mouthpiece, but use it with a smaller mouthpiece. I
yeah,
and how to take out a mouthpiece, when they're stuck. To me, the Bobcat, man, if you own one thing, just get a mouthpiece puller and learn how to use it. Um, yeah, you want to show us those tricks?
yeah, absolutely. So let's say your tuba players, because these things always fall out uh, for no reason. I haven't figured it out. The bottom of our shank gets dented, and so it's deformed. And I have found that one of the best ways, if you do not have a mouthpiece arbor, so this is a multi-instrument mouthpiece arbor. If you can pick one of these up from your local music store or anywhere online, I highly recommend them. This is the correct way to do it. They're a couple of bucks. Keep it in your kit. However, if you got to go on the stage in just a few minutes and you need that tuba mouthpiece to actually seat all the way so they can play, you can grab one of your old trumpet mouthpieces that's just laying on the floor in the back of the band hall. There always is. And so, as long as this isn't completely crushed in too far, you can usually get the trumpet mouthpiece worked into the shank of the tuba mouthpiece. And then you're going to either grab your rawhide mallet, or if you don't have a rawhide mallet, your chimes mallet works fantastically as well, as long as it's the soft rubber, rawhide, or plastic ones. And you carefully tap around the shank to reform it into a true circle.
Brilliant. The chimes mallet is hit home for me. Like I got one of those when I can't find my rawhide.
Yeah,
Yep.
every program should have a chimes mallet. I mean, I hope everyone has a set of chimes. But if you don't, pick yourself up a nice rawhide from a Harbor Freight or something like that. You just want a soft mallet to do that kind of work.
And again, you have a video on your YouTube channel about that as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about French horn slides.
French horn slides. I can't tell you how many French horns come into the shop, and the complaint is such and such note is out of tune. They're like, we can't figure it out. Why is this French horn so out of tune? And it can be on the B flat side or on the F side. And so I want to talk about what I call slide math. Let me adjust the camera down slightly for this. See if my stand will hold up for me. Okay. So slide math is the easiest to show on French horns, but it applies across all of the brass instruments. And so if we think about whole steps and half steps, like our black and our white keys on our piano, right? Whole steps and half steps. All of each one of the valves, moves the pitch up or down a whole step or a half step. So now we can apply that to the length of our tubing. So our shortest slide on every instrument is going to be our second slide. And so that is a half step. So if you think about your fingerings on your instrument, if we get a second valve, so euphonium, if we're going from F down to E, right? I guess that's kind of a bad example. Trying to think about it. Whole steps and half steps, generally how it works is the slides are predetermined lengths, and we can get a half step usually with a second slide and a whole step with a first slide, because a second slide is equal to two lengths of a second slide. And then if you think about your fingerings, a one and two can also be done as just a third valve, correct? Well, that's because
Correct. Yep.
one and two equals the same length as a third slide. So when we're trying to figure out where these slides go back in, we can think about it in that orientation. Which note am I trying to do? Am I doing a whole step or am I doing a half step? And we can figure out by looking at the lengths of, is this a first slide or is this a third slide? Now, our second set of slides for the F side of the horn, they're going to have kind of a similar shape to these. Your second slides are always going to look like this. Maybe they have a ring on them. So you know those are a matching set. So you have two rings. And if we look at the relationship between them, the longer slides are always on the top of the French horn, and the shorter set of slides is always on the back side of the French horn. Does that make sense?
100%. Because if you have them on the wrong side, you can't move them in the right way.
Yeah. And so the most common that I'll see are the 2-second slides reversed, meaning we'll have the longer one on the bottom and the shorter one on the top.
Yep.
And I get it. It looks right and you can access it easier. But if you remember your slide math, then you can make matching sets and make sure you get the longer ones on the top and the shorter ones down on the bottom.
I also cannot be the only brass player in the world who still struggles to string a French horn. Like, I got to look at the back of that book every single time when I want to do it.
Yeah. A figure eight is the best thing to remember when you are doing it. The hardest part is knowing, does the stop arm go in the up direction or the down direction?
Yep.
And so you can quickly find that by playing the horn and moving the rotor, or having someone move the rotor back and forth. And whichever one is what you expected it to be, that's the right spot.
I also love YouTube. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
You have a video that I watched that you sent me, and I believe is on there as well, where you recork mutes as well. That takes a little bit of time, but I mean, a good Harmon mute's can be $80. So it's worth the time to do that.
Yeah. And I also show you how to take out dents out of the dropped mutes with a drumstick. Drumsticks and chimes mallets, they're half your toolbox.
We were trying this. Okay, this is terrible. You're probably going to scold me, but technically it was my co-teacher. We put this on the social media page about this fall. We had a flute that we like. It was kind of a beater flute, but we thought it still was going to like function for what we wanted to do really quickly. So on the head joint, on the opening, it was caved in a little bit, kind of like you talk about the stem of a mouthpiece. So my woodwind co-teacher takes a drumstick, and we're trying to like round it out and all that. and then he gets the drumstick stuck in it, which obviously was a
Oh
problem.
no.
And it took us 3 days to, even forget how we got it out, but it was like, I think I put it on the Facebook page. I'm like, can anybody tell me how to do this? And everybody, I think, just laughed at me. I think we got an answer
That
at some point, but man,
sounds like we might have been using a marching drumstick instead of a jazz drumstick.
I don't remember, to be honest with you. It was like one of those side things that he wasn't even supposed to be a big deal, and then it
Yeah.
definitely turned into a big deal. Um, you mentioned here wax deters rust.
Yes.
Where do we see rust, and then how do you use wax to deter it?
So, marching band instruments is going to be the predominant place this is at because we always get wet. Some directors will tell the woodwinds to go inside or cover them up. Some directors say, we're going again. And for those directors, those instruments get wet and they're always going to rust up. Flutes on our thumb key, bass clarinets, on any of the side lever keys, where they don't get operated on a regular basis, like our ring keys or right hand pinky keys, the keys that don't get moved all the time, auxiliary keys, they rust up. And you won't find out until you need to play that key. So, paraffin canning wax from your local grocery store in the canning aisle. This started out as like a 3x6 block of wax, and I just cut off a chunk of it. I've got a really great video on all of my channels about how to remove a stuck rusted rod. If it's rusty, you will know because if you grab your screwdriver on any of those keys and you go to move the key, and when you turn the screw, sorry, let me get that in camera.
Yeah, there you go.
So let's say you're trying to turn the screw and the key moves with the screw, you know that's rust. And the easiest way to get that out of there is you need wax and a heat source. A lighter's fine. You just have to be very careful with your flame and making sure your flame is going up away from the plastic or wood body. And what you'll do is you'll take your wax, and if you can picture this, you have the post, which is like the round head, right? And then you have the straight rod, which is the key. There's a little tiny gap between the rod and the post head. You want to take your wax and rub it right on that spot. So you're trying to get some wax into that crack. Now you'll take your heat source and you're going to heat up the opposite side of the key. So I don't want to heat where I just put the wax. I want to get as far away from it as I can. And what that will do was cause the wax to melt and go down and coat the rod, and it will break up the rust. If you do it right, you'll actually see the rust bubble out of the top of the screw post. And then you can easily, most times, now turn the screw to remove it. From that point, all you have to do is clean it. So pipe cleaners for the inside of the tube and a little bit of steel wool to get that rust off the rod itself. You can put it back together and you're back on the field.
Brilliant. Well, one of the things I do very poorly is working on spending time on instrument maintenance on a regular basis. We always have every few months where we take time, but I have such a hard time taking class time, right, to do it. So you mentioned that obviously you save money on repair bills when your kids take care of their instruments. So what are some things that we can do with our instrument classes to do that regular upkeep?
The very first one, and if this is the number one takeaway everyone gets from this, then they're walking away with a huge win for the entire brass section. And it's one of those things that's so simple and it's the most overlooked thing ever. So if this is the only thing you take away, then this is the best. Move every slide every day. So if you're a brass player, tell your students every slide gets moved every day. If we do that, then the saliva and leakage of the horn will never have a chance to harden and set. So trumpets, we never touch our second valve slide. How often do you think those are stuck?
All the time.
Right. And then when we do try to pry them out, we always knock off the little draw knob,
I
right?
do. Yep.
Uh, so if we move that slide every day, so I pick up my horn, put my mouthpiece in. Obviously, my first and third slides should move rather well. Maybe I might move my tuning slide. A lot of players go, "Oh no, that's the spot of I'm in tune." I know because that's where the green line is. That's not a good thing.
Yeah. And I tell my students, you don't wait to brush your teeth until your teeth hurt. So don't wait until your valves are sticking to oil them. I usually tell them that on the minimum, do it every Monday.
Yeah,
And that's probably a good proactive approach.
yeah, and if we're oiling the valves often, that means our valve caps aren't getting stuck. If we're fiddling with them like most do, if we're fiddling with those daily, at least giving them an open and close just a thread or two, those won't get stuck. Bottom caps always get stuck because no one ever pays attention to them. But stuck slides, that's probably one of the most costly and most preventable repairs for brass because there's so many things that can go wrong with a stuck slide, whether that's a student, director, band dad trying to remove that stuck slide, or a technician having to go through um, a very lengthy process of disassembling a slide, like I've had to do here recently on a
Taking it apart.
euphonium.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to take the crook off so that way I could then solder something into this slide so I could twist and break it free.
Yeah.
And of course, now I'm having to disassemble a slide. There's multiple solder points. And so our repair costs just went up when the only thing we needed to do was to remember, move all your slides every day.
So
You don't
say
have to grease them, just move them.
so say we have you have a kid with a stuck tuning slide, say a trumpet, and it's stuck, but you think you can get it free. Is
Yeah.
there a trick we can do to try to free it up before we have to send it to the shop?
Yeah. Just a little bit of heat and a little bit of oil.
Yeah.
You can use your valve oil is just fine.
And
So
can
any
you tap around it too with your rawhide hammer a little bit just to see if it'll loosen it up?
Yeah, so as long as it's soft, and I would try to make sure that I'm only hitting on ferrules.
Yep.
We don't want to hit. So let's say the outer. Let's say this is a pay. Don't pay attention to the instruments here. Let's say this is an outer tube and this is an inner tube. I
Yep.
don't want to hit on the outer tube because I might cause a little dent in there, and now it's really stuck. So it's okay to hit on the ferrules because that's a hard connecting surface.
Sure.
Um, and so all we're trying to do is vibrate. We're just trying to vibrate the inner tube so that way it'll break up some of that stuff and allow it to move free. But I find that even if the slide is completely in, you can still put a little bit of oil on that crack, heat below it, and the heat will cause the oil to, capillary action. It'll move down and it'll start to break free all of that stuff.
Love it. So Andre, you have some people who are doing an online course with you who can learn this online. If anybody's interested in that, how do they reach out to you and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I've got a couple places. So I've got I've got a free area where they can check me out on Facebook. Just look up MacGyver Band Instrument Repair
Love it.
because we're learning how to use things. I after I started that group, I had noticed there was a MacGyver percussion group as well. So I joined that one too, and that one's been a lot of fun. So I'm not sure who runs that one, but they're doing a great job with it. And mine is the MacGyver Band Instrument Repair. So that's on Facebook. If you are really interested in the courses, you can reach out to me at instrumentrepairschool.com. And there's a couple links about the courses, and it talks about what those are. And I work with directors in a group setting. And so right now we meet twice weekly, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. And we spend about 2 hours going through assignments and kind of show and tell. And so we're building community on that. Of course, that's a paid group, but you get a lot of individual attention from me and making videos for you for all of the little things that come up so we can see if you can save your program a ton of money.
All right, Andre, thanks so much for doing all this stuff for us, helping us out. Hopefully some people are reaching out and have gotten a lot of it out of this as I have. You talk about an end of the year activity that you have where you can save a ton of money. You finish your last concert, you got some time with the kids, repair wise. What is that activity?
Yeah, so I like to do a cleaning by the numbers course. I'm doing this with a lot of the local programs here in North Texas, so they are familiar with this. And what you want to do is, if you, the director, are very comfortable with taking apart the instrument and doing what we call home cleanings or like bathtub cleanings, then you can actually turn this into an end of year activity to save you a ton of money on summer cleanings. And you're going to have all of your students bring in a large bath towel. They've got their cleaning supplies. They're going to bring those in. You're going to get a big jug of soap, and you're going to get one of those blow up bathtubs. And we're going to go outside, and we're going to lay our towels down on the ground, and every brass student is going to lay their instrument on their towel. And we're going to take apart the instrument by the numbers. Meaning, think of it like Simon Says. The director does it. Now everybody does it. As long as there's no stuck slides and stuck caps, it actually goes pretty quickly. So we're going to take out the first valve. Everyone lays it on the towel. We're going to take it out the second valve. You're going to lay it out on the towel. So on and so forth. First slide, second slide, third slide, main tuning slides. We laid everything out. Now everyone gets in a line, and we grab our brushes. We go to the pool, the bathtub, and everyone snakes out their instrument real quick. And it's a lot of fun because all the kids get to see the fun stuff that comes out of the horns that they should have been cleaning anyway. So it just turns into this real fun activity. So it's nice out. Hopefully you have a nice warm day when you do it. You put the instrument back on the towel. You do the same thing. Everyone gets in line. You clean those slides, and then you leave it out on the towel. By the time everyone gets through the line, the instruments have dried off.
Yeah.
And so now you just reassemble by the numbers. Now you've taught your students how to do a home cleaning. And so now they're ready to maintain their instrument going forward. And without you having to inspect every instrument personally, you have identified which instruments have the stuck slide, have the stuck this, have the missing water key, right? Because you just go through the numbers. Okay, everybody hold this up. Is this there? Yeah, does water key there? Does it move? Okay, great. Put it down. Whose doesn't? Yours. Your instrument's going to the shop, right? And you just saved yourself like 3 days of going through instruments, and you saved a bunch of money on your cleaning bill.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.